7:42, good morning to you. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Ellie.
Time to go through the papers now, and joining us this morning is husband and wife team, political editor of Sunday Mirror and Sunday People, Nigel Nelson, and Claire Pissell, a former Conservative advisor. Good morning to you both. Nigel, let's start with you, shall we? In the Telegraph, really sad story of a head teacher taking her own life in the wake of an Ofsted inspection. And it's now opened the door, hasn't it, for the scrapping of one-word school ratings, such as outstanding.
That's basically it. I mean, obviously, this was a huge tragedy. And where we get to is that the chief inspector of Ofsted, Amanda Spielman, is saying that she'll have a look at the way that they do it. The tricky bit, obviously, is that how you actually do it simply for parents to be able to decide on schools. So there are only four sections: outstanding, good, requires improvement, or inadequate. And this head teacher appears to have killed herself because her school was downgraded from outstanding to inadequate.
Can I just make a point on this? Because I've been thinking about this since this story, and there's been so much pressure on Ofsted as a result of what tragically has happened to this lady. I remember talking to people at the Samaritans a lot of years ago now, but they're saying you've got to be very careful with suicide. Suicide is not triggered by one event. And so Ofsted can't be blamed for this. There's clearly been a culmination of things which have led to this tragedy.
I think that's absolutely right. That obviously that it's a complex process, and as you say, it can't be down to one thing. And so but the education unions are demanding that Ofsted inspections stop because of this one case. Now, Claire and myself have been disagreeing about this all the way up into the studio this morning. My view is no, that Ofsted shouldn't suspend inspections. I think it's important they carry on. Nobody likes their regulator. I mean, it is one of those things. But if you're going to have the process, certainly review whether it's the best way of doing it. But no, don't cancel inspections while that review is going on.
Claire, why do you think they should?
I think they need to suspend them for the moment because I think the process doesn't work. And what we can see, and you're right, in this case there were going to be a number of other factors, but my mother was a teacher for many, many years, and I've been through the Ofsted process with her at a primary school. The amount of stress that is piled on a school for a very short period of time is ridiculous. They are there, they are trying to teach the children, they are trying to go about doing all of the rest of their duties and deal with all of the paperwork that they have. To then have this extra paperwork, extra stress, being looked at, being judged, I think the process we need to look at it and understand what it is there for, because unfortunately it has turned into such a tick box exercise that Ofsted go in. Any school could suddenly prepare beautiful paperwork. It's not going to mean that the quality of the teaching or the quality of the safeguarding or the quality of the management is in line with how it should be.
But they are watching. I mean, my mother was a primary school teacher, and you're right, the Ofsted is stressful. But isn't it necessary to safeguard the children, to make sure that they are getting the education they need?
But if a school is then deemed to be outstanding, it's not then looked at for another 4 years. So there's nothing to say that that outstanding school couldn't in 6 months' time fall through the cracks and then become worse, and just because no one's looking. I think Ofsted need to reevaluate what their part in all of this is. Now, if it is to drive up standards, absolutely brilliant. I think everybody would support that. But try doing these things on an annual or biannual basis or something else. Let's look at each school. Let's look at the children. Let's look at the communities. Let's look at the other work that they do, because it's not all just results on a piece of paper. I don't think you can judge schools like that. And anyone that has put a child through education, you go into a school and yes, you can look at what Ofsted have said, but you also get a feeling when you meet the students, when you meet the teachers, when you walk around a place, you get a feeling for it. And having done that in schools, I've done that for primary and I've done that for secondary, you get a feel for somewhere. And it doesn't mean they're necessarily the best on everything, but it's the best fit for your child. So yes, there is a point to having a regulator, absolutely, but I think they need to reevaluate what it is they do, what it is they're for, and how much stress this puts on the teaching profession.
What do you make of that then, Nigel? Because I'm a daughter of two parents. So there's two parents, two teachers. I've seen, similar to what you're talking about, Claire, the stress that consumed both of my parents when Ofsted inspectors came around. And it is that intensive prep, but you get that call, don't you, saying Ofsted's coming in tomorrow, the day after. And it's those 2 days of intensive prep and then 2 days, usually, of being inspected, and it is everything. It's very intensive.
Yes,
do you think that should be looked at?
Well, I think the system should be looked at, especially the sort of tick box exercise that they're trying to do. I was talking to a head teacher last week who'd just been through an Ofsted inspection. And he was telling me that what his big objection was, he was downgraded from outstanding, and the reason was because he didn't meet one of the particular boxes that need ticking. But there were an awful lot of other things in the school that were absolutely wonderful. I know the school quite well. I mean, really super. But Ofsted didn't look at that. That's why the whole thing needs to be examined again, and whether they've got the right system in place.
Okay, interesting. Let's have a look at. Oh, should we talk about Carol Vorderman? Oh, go on.
Yeah.
Go on. What's she said now?
Well, I agree with Carol Vorderman in this. Yeah, I absolutely do. This is the Women in Equalities Select Committee who are looking into issues around the menopause and had been asking the Health Minister, Maria Caulfield, to come along since the beginning of, the end of February, beginning of March, saying, Minister, you need to come into our committee. Now, that's exactly what happens with select committees. They can summon the minister to come and give evidence. It's not really a choice. Ministers have to go. But unfortunately, the Department for Health and Social Care, for whatever reason, decided the minister wasn't going. Carol Vorderman is part of the committees looking into what happens with menopause and had seen the letter, came back from the minister's department saying no. And unfortunately, on the day that Valders was in Parliament, she witnessed the Health Minister drinking a cup of tea in Portcullis House, an hour away, during that hour of waiting for the committee, when she said that she was unavailable, she was far too busy, she couldn't attend. So a tweet went out. And this has caused now an all-out war between the Health Minister, Carol Vorderman, Parliament, the department. Everybody is feeling upset and hurt over it. But I think it's really important that ministers do attend committees. It is unpleasant for them. And all Carol Vorderman has done is call out that behaviour. Now, the minister was invited on, I think, 3 separate occasions and just didn't choose to attend. So you kind of think she's almost brought that one upon herself. And if she had just gone and given the evidence, this is a really, really important subject to look at. And as we were talking about just now with your great interview with that lady and George's Law, these things are important. They need talking about. You need to shine a light on them so that we all understand. And this is what it's trying to do. So I think that in this instance, Carol Vorderman, tip-top.
Yeah, well, good on her then, if pointing out. No point being caught in Portcullis House having a brew.
It's the most unfortunate, because I bumped into them all in Portcullis House, and you could see the sort of distance. She wasn't even sort of hidden away in a corner. It was quite in view of everybody. It was a little bit inflammatory.
Not good. Nigel, let's have a look in the Mail at Boris Johnson could be left in political limbo for months, they say.
That's what the Mail is saying, that they're working through the timetable after the Privileges Committee hearing, which probably won't report back until June, or maybe not even until July. And if they don't report back till July, Parliament then goes into recess, so there is no vote. It needs a vote of the entire Commons about any penalty the committee wants to impose. So what would happen is that Boris Johnson would have to wait to September before finding out his fate.
Does that matter?
Well, it matters if we've got an election coming up. It rather depends on what the committee do. If they go for a suspension beyond 10 days, it means a recall petition and a possible by-election. Now, it rather depends from Boris Johnson's point of view whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. At the moment, the Parliament's kind of head pollster, Lord Hayward, is saying that Boris Johnson would lose in Uxbridge should he stand there in a by-election. But that could be a good thing for Boris Johnson, because he could then go and find a safe seat, go on the chicken run, find a safe seat, and come back at the general election. And so his political ambitions may be alive yet again. I think what's going to happen, just judging by the indications from the committee, is they will do some kind of penalty below those 10 days. So he'll get a rap across the knuckles, but he won't have to go for a by-election.
Right. If he was given more than 10 days, would it even get through the Commons?
It could do. Yeah, it's a free vote. I think that his support has drifted away. I'd have said about now that there are 20 MPs who still fervently support him, but that's it. So on a free vote with Labour and Tory MPs, he probably would get that suspension.
Okay. Look, we need to leave you two there for the time being. Claire Pearsall, Nigel Nelson, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.